There we go.
And we've purposely decided not to have a moderator today just because one of the ideas behind community-centric fundraising is that there isn't really a sense of hierarchy. And so we want to honor that in this space as well and have more of a community conversation versus a hierarchical approach.
Awesome. So one of the first things we wanted to talk about is just like, what is CCF? I know that there are some folks in the room that have not been able to attend a community practice yet. So I think if we want to go down the line and say like what our definition of CCF is, right, that we have 10 principles that are given to us by fundraisers like Voulay on the CCF website. But I think CCF shows up differently for each of us depending on what organization we're in. So do we want to start there?
Sure.
Sounds great.
Amy?
Okay. Hi, I'm Amy Ramirez with the Healthcare Foundation, Northern Sonoma County. CCF to me is really just a guiding principles of how we want to raise funds and get community engagement to better our community. The idea is that it's more about the collective good, that we are all doing good work in our own space, in our own area of focus, and by sharing resources and leveraging, connections and putting our brains together, we are stronger together for the good of the community rather than our own individual, strategic plans. So that's what CCF looks like for us.
Hi, I'm Katie Greenwald with the Santa Rosa Junior College Foundation. Amy, that was a really great overview. And for anyone who isn't aware, maybe hasn't had the chance to dive in yet, the community-centric fundraising principles were developed by fundraisers of color in 2020 to really help provide a bit of a framework and community around a different way to go about fundraising. So they got together and they said, this is broken. What can we do to fix it? And then they started to put together principles that aligned to what they needed out of fundraising, and then started to build this movement around it, which we're all very fortunate to be a part of now. For us at the SRJC Foundation, what this looks like is we took a look at all of the principles. There are 11 of them in total. And we said, these are all great and these are all really valuable and needed. And we know that if we roll all of these out to our board and our community and our donors right now, this is a little bit overwhelming. So why don't we pick 4 that we feel like really resonate the most with what we're trying to accomplish and build those into the way that we go about our work. So that's what we did. We sat down with our board chair, our vice chair, our executive director, Jay, who's here today. And we decided, we looked through all of them and we said, which of these really resonate the most with us? So we decided principle number 1, which is about making sure that all of our efforts are rooted in racial equity and social justice. We decided on principle number 2, which says that we don't really exist in just in a siloed space. We're all a part of the larger ecosystem. Principle 6, which says our community of donors are our trusted partners. And with that, we have to have very transparent and real conversations with them. So we need to make sure that we're focusing on those conversations, even if they're difficult. We shouldn't shy away from that. And then principle 7, which says we need to foster a sense of belonging, not othering. So what we're doing is we really take a look at these in a lot of the work that we do, including events, which is what we're going to talk about today. But in our overall strategic planning, we are looking at how do these principles really fit in and how do we tailor our new strategic plan to fit within these principles.
Eloquently said. I'm not gonna give as in-depth of a description. I don't think I could. But for me and for positive images, I would say that community-centric fundraising is accepting the fact that the system of fundraising is broken and that if our vision of a more inclusive Sonoma County is really what we're working towards, we can only chip away at a piece of it. And instead, we need to be aligned with other organizations that are also interested in attacking that same vision and making sure that we create the Sonoma County where everybody feels held and has access to resources and all of those things. Then we need to move from a scarcity mindset when it comes to fundraising to a plentiful, bountiful mindset, an abundance mindset, where it's not scary to share resources with other organizations that are also working in service of that vision of a more inclusive Sonoma County. So in that way, for us, CCF shows up as decentering the donor and taking ownership of the work away from the people and organizations funding the work, and instead putting that back in the hands of our employees and our community that are taking care of each other as much as we are taking care of them. So we do that in a lot of messaging. We do that in events, which is what we're going to be talking about today. And we're trying to do that across the board. For us, CCF feels like that missing piece of the puzzle. We have a flattened hierarchy, we have a flattened pay scale, and we have all of these things that are pushing us towards equity at every level of our organization. And CCF is that missing piece of the puzzle to create the equitable organization that I want to, and the rest of my staff and coworkers want to work for also.
Beautiful. I'm Monica Julien. I'm the Executive Director of VIDAS, which is Vital Immigrant Defense Advocacy and Services here in Sonoma County. And I would say that what CCF really has meant to our organization and to me is staying true and aligned with our origin story. So VIDAS was actually built by a refugee from El Salvador, 2 undocumented mothers from Mexico, and a physician's assistant who was working in a migrant farm worker clinic who felt so compelled by
Thing you're saying.
Is that you can't hear very well? Okay, let's see if that's setting it better.
Get closer to you.
Okay.
Who really came together to meet an urgent need in our community. They were feeling attacked, feeling like their family members were being attacked and separated and deported. I mean, they really came together. Like Chase said, when he said taking care of each other, that's exactly what they did and sort of continued to do. And I'm in a really unique position because this very grassroots, beautiful movement has sort of started evolving into a nonprofit organization, more legitimate, more well-known. And we have a great opportunity to not sort of reinvent the practices that end up ultimately being harmful to the very people who started this program and we're working together to take care of each other. And so figuring out how to really stay true to our roots. And I feel like CCF gives us amazing tools to be able to do that as we try to build our capacity to meet a greater need. The need keeps growing, and how do we grow and build our capacity in a good way that doesn't lose sight of our origin, that really stays committed to the needs of our staff and our community that we started for and are here for, and always moves with the needs of the community. And as has been mentioned on the panel, not with more the needs of the donors or our need to get funding or those bigger sort of organizational concerns. And finally, for me, I absolutely love that it really does focus on our interrelationships and our connecting with each other. My very favorite, sort of guiding quote right now is Audre Lorde's, "Without community, there's no liberation." And I feel like this CCF really gives us an opportunity to figure out how to work in community in a way that is not harmful to each other, but actually builds each other up. So I'm very inspired to be here.
Ditto. I also forgot to say that my name is Chase.
Everyone knows you.
Okay, so we want to talk about the event spaces that we've created. The reason we're leading this conversation that we hope y'all will participate in is because we all 4 recently tried to apply CCF principles to an event. So I'm thinking maybe we can start by going down the line and just saying what our event was, what the purpose of it was, and then we can jump into conversation from there.
Yeah, and we have some questions outlined here, but after we give an overview of the events, we'd really love for all of you to just jump in with questions and make it interactive.
Sure. So Healthcare Foundation, we have been putting on a yearly annual event called Noche de Amor for many years, and it was an evolution. Healthcare Foundation started with a major fundraiser called Wine, Women, and Shoes. And it kind of evolved to the Noche de Amor event. And it really, the CCF principles, Kim Bender, who's the executive director prior to me, she really started, along with Mary, our development director, to implement these CCF principles several years ago. So 2 years ago, they really moved away from the organized seating chart, because we all know as we go to events, and having been a funder for a major organization for many years, depending on how much money you either gave or are predicted to give, that determines where you would sit at an event. So that was one of the first things that they did away with when the seating just became open, so that everyone felt equally valued while they were watching the program. After that, they moved away from the auction, took away the auction, and then this last year we took away the paddle race. And really that was, it was a big shift because, you know, the culture has long been at most of our events that, you know, it's a chance for people to raise their paddle and, you know, to contribute in this very public way, and for everyone attending to congratulate them on contributing. But for many at the event, you know, that's not something that we can participate in. And then you feel maybe less like your contributions matter, or that, you know, maybe you're not being celebrated in the same way that the people raising their paddle are being celebrated. So that shifted. So last year we did what was called a silent moment of giving. So it was truly silent. It was anonymous. Everyone just had this quiet time to give at whatever amount was meaningful to them. And it was a lovely way to do the fund and need. Everyone definitely felt more included. But we've taken things even further, and we're kind of moving straight ahead, and we will not be doing Noche this coming year. We have decided with the approval of our board that we are going to shift away from the major event and really start to do more major gift work, trying to cultivate stronger relationships with our donors and with our community members, because we want to bring them along. And I can talk about that more probably in a little bit. But we have kind of, starting with Kim and Mary, and you know, getting the board to come along with these CCF principles slowly through the years, and now to say we're going to take this big risk and we're going to completely move away from our major event model.
All right, so moving right along, at the SRJC Foundation, we have a long history of hosting the SRJC President's Address to the community. And the way that that's taken shape for a number of years is that we would host a luncheon event that is a little cost prohibitive to the majority of the community, with the intention of bringing some of our business leaders and donors along to hear the message from the president and have a lunch served to them. Well, this last year, we had a new president join the SRJC community, and she's got a little bit of a different style and a little bit of a different way of doing things. And she really has an intention of being a lot more inclusive to our community overall. And we wanted to create an event that aligned with the CCF principles and aligned with who she is as a leader. So we scrapped the whole way that we were doing it before, and we looked at everything through a new lens. We decided to move away from the luncheon and instead have a lecture almost at our new auditorium that we haven't really had a chance to show off yet because it was redesigned during COVID. And so we haven't had a chance to have the community in there yet. This really allowed us to focus on the content of her message rather than being so distracted by the luncheon. And it really helped us keep the cost of the events down. So we went from a $70 event to a $30 event. This meant that a lot more people could join at that individual ticket price, and it wasn't so cost prohibitive. It also meant that she got to really connect with the audience with the community-centered message that she had prepared, and they had the opportunity to take that in. And then we followed with a reception afterwards. So everyone still got that one-on-one time. They got to connect and mingle and network and talk with her. They even probably got to talk with her more than they would have got to at the other setup. Not only that, but it really lessened the impact of our facilities team. Whereas before they had 3 days to put together this huge event, now they had just mere hours to put it all together, and that really lightened the load for them quite a bit. Another item that we incorporated was for our sponsorships. We had relatively low sponsorship levels, $500 to $1,000. And what we said to our sponsors was, you know, we took a look at who our community was, and we said, our whole community doesn't revolve around the donor and the business leaders. It revolves around them and our students and our community as a whole and our faculty and staff. And we want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to attend, especially our students. They're really the core of our community. So what we said to our sponsors was, if you provide the sponsorship, we're going to give a student a ticket as a part of this sponsorship. At the $1,000 level, they got 2 student tickets. And so that helped us bring in some more students to the event. But we realized, wait a second, is this really an event that our students are going to feel like, you know, they're getting out? Are they going to come to it? Are they going to really show up and want to be here for it? Or do we need to really think about this in a different way? Do we need to get our student involvement in a way that speaks directly to them? So we worked with our student services team and we decided, you know what, at the same time as the president's address, we're going to have this other event happening on campus. It's going to be a welcome back party for students. It's going to be fun. We're going to have pizza and games and wings, and we're going to live stream the president's address in. So that's what we did. The president showed up to that event. She played games with the students. She spoke with them, and then they had their party, and they were actually all really invested in the message. They sat around the TV, they watched, they played the bingo card that we had. It was really something that they really felt included and involved in. And those sponsored dollars helped provide for that party. So it paid for the party. We ordered enough food for 250 students, and we ran out before the event ended, which meant we had almost as many students at that event as we had in Burbank Auditorium the same day. Not only that, but we offered the same type of party for our satellite campuses, and they had students come in more numbers than we could have ever expected to watch. They felt really included and involved. And at our Roseland campus, we actually paid for the Spanish language translation on our YouTube captions to make sure that our students really had the lowest barrier to entry to go back and rewatch and hear the message than they could any other way. So those were a few ways that we lessened the cost for the community, which made the event more accessible overall. And then even though it wasn't really meant to be a fundraising event, we netted almost $20,000 to give back to our Roseland campus at the end of the day. So I have more to get into, but I'll hand it over to Chase.
Incredible. So we hosted our first ever annual gala this year, the Queer Magic Gala, spelled Gayla. And our theme this year was Cirque du Soleil. You know, really got to drive home that it is a queer event. And I was in the unique position where we had never done a gala before. So there weren't expectations of fitting a certain format put on me, which was pretty freeing. And also we were in a position, for those of you that don't know, Positive Images has experienced a tremendous amount of growth over the past 2 years, thanks to 2 capacity expanding grants, which also means, of course, that initially we were staring at a fiscal cliff. So when it came time to start planning this event, there was a bit of a make or break there where, you know, we weren't expecting to make the, you know, $300,000 a night that I was generating at the Lime Foundation galas on our first event. But we were needing this to at least do better than break even, right? And there's a lot of uncertainty when you're planning your first annual event, especially for an organization that's never held something like this. So we didn't know what our capacity for guests purchasing tickets or sponsorships would look like. So this was a scary one to walk into. So I was trying to balance, you know, our rule at CCF of try to implement 10% moving forward every single time. So some of the things that we implemented to get us off the ground and still feel like we're moving towards a CCF principle is with the seating chart, like Amy mentioned, I think that there's a lot of power in the seating chart and where someone's positioned in the room tells you how much that organization values that person. So we wanted to make sure that we were disrupting that. So we didn't have any VIP tables. We didn't have any tables named after sponsors. Instead, we named our tables after our queer ancestors that we had chosen, like CC McDonald and activists and folks that have done work in our community with a little placard about why they're important to us. So that was one way that we disrupted our gala. We also made sure that everybody of our performers, we brought in a Cirque troupe to perform, that every performer was queer as well and had the opportunity to talk about themselves instead of just getting up and putting on a show and exiting the stage. We also spent most of the time on the mic talking about the work and the staff. And we also presented 2 awards, one to a staff member that was doing good work and one to, or actually to 2 staff members. One of them is in the room right now, Laura, our bilingual bicultural manager. And then we also presented one to a community member that was organizing in the community. So in that way, most of the time spent on stage talking about the event was focused on the folks doing work instead of letting folks, like with the traditional paddle raise, hold the mic and talk about why they're donating and why their money matters. And then what are some of the other things that we implemented? I had a list going in my head. We also were able to, instead of doing like a very expensive catered meal to save on cost and make it so that we could take some chances in terms of, making the paddle raise lower thresholds, making the sponsorships lower thresholds, is that we actually brought in food trucks that were also owned by community members or families of community members to serve the meal, and everybody was able to get their tickets and go out to the food trucks and purchase those with their tickets that were included in their original ticket price, which also disrupted the importance and hierarchy of when tables are plated food. Folks were able to do that on their own timeline and agenda. And then we made the emphasis on our auction actually silent so that there wasn't those big public displays of wealth, while only saving a couple of items for a live auction moment. Our big live auction item was a piece of art created by 4 queer artists in our community. So again, every single thing was tied back to the work that we were doing, instead of letting there be moments for, those self-aggrandizing, raise the paddle, I can spend more money than you moments. So that was kind of our shift forward, and I'm happy to report that we did not just break even, we actually beat our fundraising goal that evening, which was really, really lovely, and we welcomed a bunch of new supporters into the PI family, which was really meaningful, and getting them to be connected to the mission through that event was really important and grateful. So we were pretty happy with how the event went, also recognizing that there's more work to do to step towards the CCF principles from where we started. So that's kind of where PI is at.
We were in a similar situation. VIDAS is celebrating its 10-year anniversary as a nonprofit in Sonoma County, and it was our first ever large fundraising event, sort of dinner style. And so when I was first figuring out how to do this, of course, I was going to local community members who have done big fundraising events, and it really was that sort of traditional template model. You do a gala, you get sponsors, you do an auction, you have the surf and turf dinner, you have a theme, it was like all those sort of regular things. And I started down that path and it just kept not resonating. And even the word gala, which I don't know if it's gala or gala, and I'm like, only positive images should be able to do galas now.
Thank you.
So, if I do a gala, it really didn't fit with our vibe. Like our staff, they're from all over the world. Our community is like so much fun. We just have a really like kind of global vibe. A lot of the things just didn't really feel like us. And so finally, a few months in, I just said, we're just going to do us, or just like try to do this a little bit differently. And we decided to have it be more of a celebration of our 10 years, and really wanted to honor community and all the extraordinary community members who had helped us along the way, who, we had mutually supported through the many things that like we've been through in Sonoma County, particularly what like immigrant and refugee groups have been through. And so just really wanted it to be a celebration where everyone genuinely felt welcome, just little things like we sent out an email saying like, what makes you feel comfortable? We don't want anyone to feel like they had to show up in a gown or, go buy something. It's like just these really simple little things that we try to figure out how to make it feel like more accessible and more, just more about community connection. And when we were talking about sort of what outcomes we wanted, fundraising kept being kind of like number 3 or number 4. I mean, we definitely needed it to do that. We couldn't really afford to just put on a party, although it would be awesome if one day we would be in a position to be able to do that. But so we also tried to keep our costs low. We had the event venue was at the Brown Barn in on Donahue Street, which was a really beautiful venue. I even just like the shape, just like the idea of a circle instead of, I don't know, there was something to that was really beautiful. With catering, we went with Sonoma Family Meal, who I didn't know it was their first time actually catering off site for them. I didn't find that out until after we had already agreed to it, but it was the best thing I could have done. I like gave them our vision of, oh, you know, we just like kind of want this global flair. And it was an awesome meal. We had it served family style to just kind of reinforce that feeling of like, we're at the table together, we're community. Again, kind of similar to what Chase was saying, we really just tried to incorporate community and highlighting other organizations and other people as much as we could. So our bartender was an American family therapist from TLC Child and Family Services. So had them there. Our florist is a local nonprofit out of West County. Just those kinds of things, and really paid attention to creating a beautiful space that felt welcoming and warm. We really spent a lot of time on that, just creating a nice space, which worked out well. Similarly, we did not have an auction. I had actually gone to a few auctions during the preparation period. And one of the things I noticed is that I felt like there wasn't really time to connect. So like an entire hour of the event would be just the auction. And I just felt like I couldn't really talk to the people at my table. And yeah, that was something that I really wanted our event people to feel genuinely like they could connect. Like we didn't have so much planned out for speaking, or that they, couldn't connect with each other. So yeah, so we did not do a live auction or a silent auction. We did a quiet moment of giving through a pledge card. And I do think that we probably could have done a better job of getting everyone to engage in that. It was one of those things, one of the big takeaways I had was you don't have to shy away from fundraising in those moments. Like we can still say, hey, community, we need this. We do need the financial support. There is a big need. We are trying to build capacity, and just do it in kind of a different way. So that was one sort of thing that I learned in the process. I'm trying to think, there are so many other little pieces I'm trying to remember. Oh, similarly, in terms of performers and stuff, we really wanted to like amplify people in our community as well. So one of our paralegals is actually like a rising pop star. So we had her perform. We had La Gente with SF, which is this awesome band who came out and performed. And then Grupo Folklorica Quetzalán came. But I really like your idea of having them have a moment to speak too. We didn't do that. So I hadn't thought of that, but that would be really beautiful as well. So yeah, we got a lot of really good feedback afterward that people did feel connected and celebrated. They were surprised by other people they knew in the room from other sort of organizations or areas or mutual aid. People, they're like, wow, I didn't even know that they knew. And it did feel like we had this really beautiful balance of like people who've sort of been there from the start and people who are just starting to learn about VIDAS. And they seem to be interacting in a really good way and figuring out sort of like what's possible. So yeah, so much to talk about when we really start talking about it.
Really, that's true.
Yeah, maybe we should pause and see if people have questions or ideas or comments.
Any questions? Zoom land? Okay. Well, our next question down our list is, what elements of CCF did you implement into your fundraising event? And I planned one for this question. So maybe I'll kick us off with that while questions are being generated. One of the, yes, Adriana, you can absolutely drop questions in the Zoom chat. So one of the principles of CCF is valuing time as much as money in terms of contribution to the organization. So one of the things that I wanted to do was make sure that our volunteers that helped put the event on felt really included in the event, and not just like they were off to the side doing work so that the people with wealth that could afford the ticket were able to enjoy the event. So I scheduled our volunteers such that they all had at least a half of the event to just be a guest and enjoy. They all had actual seats at the event. They all got the same meal as all the other guests, and they all were able to participate in the really fun parts. So during the performances, there were no volunteer schedules to be done during that time. I had a couple of staff running around doing things, and one of my friends who I can say still got a lot out of the event. But to be able to take the volunteer position and make it such that you will get to spend time enjoying the event, and those volunteers that helped set up were able to enjoy the entire event, felt really, really beautiful, because then what actually happened is during the event, I'm looking around at every single table and there's a volunteer sitting at every single table integrated with the folks that were able to spend the money to buy the ticket and are buying silent auction items and are contributing in ways outside of volunteering. So creating a space where we've evened a playing field in that way too felt really beautiful, because all of these folks that typically wouldn't get to enjoy an event such as this now get to participate. And also, it really made the event feel more community driven, because the person you're sitting next to is saying, oh my gosh, I painted that piece of decor that's sitting on our table, or I did the graphic design for that thing that's sitting on the table, or I set up the bubble machine, you know? So it made it feel really connected to like the logistics of the event, which is another part of the things that we do as fundraisers that are, you know, without this work, we wouldn't have as much funding to do the work. So having folks be connected in that way also was a great way to bring it back to mission and connect them to the folks that are in the room. And a lot of our volunteers were participants in our program that just wanted to be there. So it was really great to be able to do that.
Yeah, one thing we did, which I appreciated, because I had just started with the foundation, like I think weeks before Noche. But we sent an article out very purposefully to prepare our guests. And it was titled "Why No Paddle Race." And so folks they already understood, you know, the CCF principles and the thought behind the shift. And then we spoke to it also, you know, during the program, and we talked about the shift from charity to mutual aid. So it felt very purposeful, and people understood why things were different and the very, you know, the intentionality behind it, rather than just saying, oh, that was different, that was interesting.
Cool. So for our president's address, when we took a look at who our community is and who we really want to make sure hears this message, what we realized was in previous years, the address was always held in June. And that meant, I know, I see the look on Rachel's face. She's like, wait a second, it's all the students are gone in June. Like, everyone's graduated. What's going on? So we decided instead that we'd host it in September. So that meant that our whole community had the opportunity to join. That really got back to fostering a sense of belonging and not othering, Principle 7, which we focus on. Another principle, number 2, making sure that we see ourselves as a part of the larger ecosystem, is that we lowered our price significantly. So it is $30 to join, but we understand that's still out of reach for a lot of folks. And so we sent a message out to all of the folks who support students from K through 12, who we have regular communications with. And we said, you know what, why don't you please join us for free? We had tons of people, especially from 10,000 Degrees. They were so excited to get that, and they just came in droves. So that was a way that we made sure that our whole community truly was involved. Speaking to principle number 1, making sure that our efforts are really grounded in racial equity and social justice. One other element that was a part of the event's tradition and history for a long time, was that we would have a student sing the national anthem. And as we started to put the event together this year, we thought, well, it's really important that we have a student voice. We want to make sure that we're honoring that. We give our students a space to shine on the stage. But let's think about the song. Maybe we select something different. So we brought that idea up to Dr. Garcia, and she immediately was very enthusiastically like, yes, let's bring something that really lives in the space of unity and a new direction and a big change for the future. And what we came back with was Defying Gravity. So our student singer sang Defying Gravity, and it was just so beautiful. Let's see, what else? Our college, we're super fortunate to have a really wonderful disability resources team. And so for all of our major events now, we have ASL interpreters, and that was really driven by the fact that we have a new vice president who's deaf. And so having her in that space has really helped make sure that we are including this as a part of our practice for a lot of our events. But really the main thing that I want to focus on when it comes to the CCF principles isn't necessarily the event planning or how the event was formed. It really, Dr. Garcia came with a very powerful message that I don't think our community has heard this way before. And she really outlined for the community, this is the real state where our students are at. This is the equity gap that we see. We have almost 80% of our students are part-time, yet they're not completing at the same rate as our full-time students. We have a minority student population where the majority of our students are Latinx, but they aren't completing at the same rate as our white students are. So she highlighted that, and she really made sure that the community walked away with this message that when one of us succeeds, we all succeed, and we need to come together to help solve this issue. So that was by far and away something that I think was really resonated with people, and they were able to focus on that message and come together afterward and have those conversations. And we'll continue to have those conversations as the year progresses.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I don't know that I have a ton to add to that. Definitely, we also wanted to make it accessible, our event accessible to anyone. And we had a really beautiful showing from the community of people who said, I can't go, but I want to sponsor somebody else who can. So we had several of those where people couldn't attend, but they sponsored somebody else's seat. And in our outreach, we did make it clear that if finances were a barrier, just to reach out, that everyone was welcome. And similarly with we did have a couple of volunteers who otherwise wouldn't have been able to come, but they were incredible, and we made sure that they sat and had dinner with us and everything too. So sounds like kind of similar principles on that.
Definitely. We do have a question in the Zoom chat from Andriana from CTE Foundation. I'm curious to know about growth, if any, in new donors, supporters as a result of shifting your event models, implementing some of these principles. Did you attract any new audiences, donors, supporters, etc.?
Yeah, we definitely, because the event was because more people were encouraged to give it any level that was meaningful for them. We had more new donors at that event than any other time. They were lower giving, but they were new donors nonetheless. So definitely increased our engagement through the model.
Yeah, that's really great.
We're in a unique position where, like I said, we really did not have a regular donor base except for a few folks. And we also had a board that wasn't engaged in fundraising. We didn't have a development officer at all prior to my arrival at PI. So almost every donor is new. But I will say we have had a few actually larger donors reach out, specifically mentioning that they appreciated that we were integrating equity at every level. We're pretty clear about why we're doing that on our website. And this donor had specifically said that, like, in reading our website, she was excited to know that it wasn't just on the community level, but it was integrated in every piece of the organization. So we did attract some new donors in that way. And it's been really lovely because my board doesn't really have any development or fundraising experience at all, save a few of them. But they are very equity-minded people. And so being able to like introduce this new concept, because they've all been to galas before and they know what it's normally like, to introduce this concept to them and have them be on board because of their values, but then also be able to say, and it's working, feels really, really exciting.
We have grown a lot over the last couple of years. Our staff has almost doubled. And we wanted to make sure that staff could attend to at any level, even if it, was just like our interns. And so having them come and bring their sort of friends and family who didn't know a lot about VIDAS was actually a really beautiful way to sort of expand our network of support and community. And then we also, in some of the organizations that we have partnered with, just to put on the event, learned about some more needs in our community. So we got like more work too, but in a good way, just like, wow, we have students who are undocumented. Can you help us with this? Or, those kinds of things where new partnerships definitely forming and new collaborations and opportunities to really serve a community need. So that came out of our event too.
Yeah. At the SRJC Foundation, we're very fortunate to not have to rely on fundraising events for our operating budget. So we this isn't an event that's set up as a fundraising event. It's set up so that we can cover our costs. And because we kept costs so low with the way that we put it together, we did end up having a surplus, which is really wonderful to have. So we didn't necessarily focus so much on really ramping up our event sponsorship efforts for this one. However, we did bring on a few new board members this year, and this is really our board's event. So throughout this next year, we're going to be really intentional about making sure that we help them understand how they can help support something like this, and hopefully that comes with new sponsorships. I am happy that we did not have any real major feedback from our sponsors about how we were setting up our events. We had our presenting sponsor back again this year, and we had a lot of returning sponsors. But really, Jay and team work hard throughout the year to develop those one-on-one relationships so that fortunately we don't have to necessarily rely on our events for bringing in the funds.
Right. And what about the downside? Any major donors who you lost because of your alignment with CCF and the fact that you didn't do a paddle raise? Amy?
Honestly, no. We kind of keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, but overwhelmingly, the feedback we have received is that it was refreshing and welcomed, and I've gone to quite a few lunches with major donors to let them know that we are not doing Noche in 2025, and unanimously, they have all said, fantastic. I don't know if you've noticed, but I give you money. I do not wish to attend those things. So we really have had nothing but positive feedback, which I don't know that that would have been the case a few years ago. I do think it's because of the work that Mary and Kim did to kind of bring the community and the board along on this journey. I think that's part of the reason why. But yeah, honestly, I don't know if Mary would agree, but I don't think we've really had any negative.
If anything, we've seen a bit of an increase across all of our donors. I was going to add to the comments that we just made about kind of, receiving new donors through the event. We did, and also, it's our practice internally to always acknowledge every donor at every level. So everyone gets a phone call. And over the past several months, we've made follow-up phone calls to these new donors who we did get at Noche this year. So that they are valued and appreciated, not just for that gift. They got their initial call, but then they've got follow-up calls from us and from our board members too. It's a great way that we find to engage our board members, because as Chase said, oftentimes they're not particularly comfortable in the role of the ask, but who doesn't want to give a thank you call, right? Who doesn't want to pick up the phone and thank somebody? And so we've been working with them over the last several months on doing that.
If anyone on the phone missed that, the comment from the room was that they've been very intentional about following up with all donors at all levels and giving that thank you, regardless of the amount given. Did I miss? Okay. I think from our ends, we got some confusion because people were used to when you train folks in the community year over year that this is how it's going to happen, and that's what they expect. And so even though we were putting out this communication that things were different, I got so many phone calls with people saying, at my table, I'm like, we're not doing tables. So, but there wasn't really like negativity that I think we might have heard a few little gripes here and there that were kind of under the radar, and we figured that those might be attributed to something else that, they were just hoping to find a way to get out a gripe. But Jay, I don't know if you experienced anything else as far as any negative reactions or anything. No.
The one negative, I guess, reaction that I wasn't expecting is I mentioned earlier that we decided not to do any VIP tables, which meant that there were a few folks that had purchased single admission tickets and a couple of volunteers that we placed at sponsor tables. Of course, our sponsors are buying their tickets in bulk and they want to sit with their friends and their guests. So we did that, but we made sure that there was space for other community members at all of those tables as well. And I had one of those sponsors come up to me and ask if I could let that person know that they were sitting at the wrong table, because they assumed that they had every single seat at the table, which they did not. And once I explained it to them, they were like, oh, okay, I'll say hi, I guess. And then it was fine. I think it was just that they expected something like you're saying of like, I've been, even though this was our first gala, I've been to 100 galas, and when I purchase a table, I get the whole table.
Yeah.
And I think that that was just having to remind them that like, nope, that's not what we're doing. And then they were like, okay, sounds good. So I think it is there's going to be some conditioning to break through with folks that are regular attendees of events like this. But once you have that maybe kind of awkward conversation with them, I've not experienced anybody, especially when you explain the why, that goes, I don't like that, because also how embarrassing would it be to say, sorry, I don't like equity, to a fundraiser. So I really think that folks, once they understand the why, have no issue.
I definitely got pushback from a donor who beforehand, when I mentioned that we weren't going to be doing an auction, actually a couple who were trying to be helpful, who are people who do this, who have done it in the past successfully, have raised a lot of money for different organizations, who just said, you're going to be leaving money on the table. And then I did have a donor say, I would like to be recognized. I want to be recognized for what I give. And so I tried to figure out a way to recognize that person, but without doing the auction, and just explain that. And it was a very uncomfortable conversation, especially, you know, I'm very new to nonprofit management. We don't have a development team. You know, it really is just kind of learning as we go. And it was just an uncomfortable, kind of awkward conversation, but ultimately she did donate a lot. She came to the event. She had a good time. She had good feedback. You know, so we'll see. I'm kind of curious where we are now.
Yeah.
Maybe need a follow-up phone call.
Yeah.
But yeah, there definitely was some pushback on it, but ultimately, overwhelmingly, people were very, very happy and felt like they did feel like there was a sense of celebration and community and connection, and that was more important to us.
There was another question in the chat from Karen Doherty. How would you handle a situation where an individual purchased a full table and invited their friends? So like I said, I just made sure that there were extra seats over what was included in the package. So that made it so that it was possible, and I was very clear in my marketing that it did not say private table. So that was how I approached that. One thing that I think is interesting is in living into the CCF principles, Amy, you're doing away with Noche entirely. I personally don't have plans to do away with our gala, but instead continue to shift it more towards a community event and make it more of like a joy center that celebrates some queer joy moment, and make it more and more accessible to folks every single time. So that's kind of how I'm approaching it. I'm curious why y'all decided to move towards just removing the event entirely.
Several reasons. One, we are a team of 3.5. So putting on an entire event, our development director, Mary, we calculated hours. I think it was like 800 plus hours. And she really was not able to work at the top of her scope as development director. So that was one reason. The second is that the event itself, like we want to really cultivate like deeper relationships with our donors. And this is something that's been prepped for many years. And now we finally have all of 2025. And we're saying that it's a pause. We're not like killing Noche forever. It's just a pause on Noche so that we can really take those 800 plus hours and we can devote them to meeting with donors, to helping them be thought partners and bring them along this journey of, you know, really supporting our community and understanding why everyone in the community benefits from this work, rather than having a single transactional event. And the other piece of it is that it helps us to like be more accurate in our financial forecasting. We're going to be doing smaller cultivation events throughout the year, more intimate, and a little bit different. And so by doing that, we can on a quarterly basis kind of look at where we are in our fundraising goals. And we have laid out some very detailed fundraising goals for the year, broken down by quarter and month and week. Rather than just kind of a wait and see of how we do. Events are very expensive to put on and becoming more expensive every single year. Sponsorship levels keep going down as there's just more competition, and the price of, you know, food and everything keeps raising. So for us, it just made a lot of sense to pause and to pivot. And I was going to mention something else about cost. Oh, the other thing is really, it kind of, as a foundation, we're not doing direct service work. You know, we are essentially supporting our local nonprofits and clinics. And so it gave us a chance to kind of let them shine. A lot of our local organizations in Northern Sonoma County are doing events for the first time. And so this is a way for us to kind of, in a quieter way, support them rather than competing with them. So it, like I said, it's a pause year, it's a pivot. We're really excited for the cultivation events that we have planned for the year. We're looking forward to all of them. Rather than this kind of daunting, like, the big event, like thing coming down the road. So we'll see how it goes, but we're feeling really optimistic about it.
I love that. Should we pause for questions in
Yeah.
the room again?
Yeah.
Ellie.
Well, first, thank you. It's just really wonderful to hear get this inside look into what you guys are doing and lots of new ideas. I was curious if there was anything you did on the front end, maybe out of fear or anticipation of, making a big shift, which feels, risky. If there were any other strategies you had for potentially like offsetting funding that you might not receive by not having an auction, or if it kind of worked out with lowering the cost and kind of looking at things differently. And I'm also curious if, based on the success that you've had with these changes, if you are, how you think about like your communication, right? Because I know so many donors are so tired of events because they are so formulaic and, kind of the same. So just being able to share, like, this isn't going to be a gala that you usually think it's going to be, if that's, part of your thinking ahead.
Yeah, I'll take the second part of that question to start. I wanted to make my messaging very clear that this wasn't going to be a typical gala. I wanted it to be very clear that like this is a party first and foremost. I wanted to evoke the same kind of excitement that like the North Bay Cabaret gets for like Hello Weird and those kind of events, where I wanted people to show up in costume and I wanted people to participate in the like performance of the event just as a participant. So I really pushed the graphic choices with one of my board members who's a graphic designer. We sat down and we're like, how can we make this, how can we give all of the promo for this stuff the funky fun vibe that we know the event is going to be? So making some bolder choices that I wouldn't make in other spaces, right? Like when I was designing last year's Lime Foundation Gala promotional materials, it was red carpets, it was black and gold. And when I was like, how can I make this pop more? I said, well, we have this beautiful brand kit that has all of these neons in it. So I'm gonna create the neon circus of my dreams. And we created a bunch of resource packs that are all deeply circus themed in our brand kit colors. So everything was bright pink and yellow. And even the wording was specifically saying like, a gala unlike Sonoma County has ever seen before, was exactly how we promoted it. And I think in doing that and making some weird choices, like our dress code was Sonoma County Cirque Casual, made the buzz around the event and like, oh my God, what are you gonna wear? What the hell does that mean, right? Kind of do some of its own work. I overheard a conversation at Brew one day of folks that I knew, but they were like, what does Cirque Casual mean? And it was exciting to hear people talking about the buzz of that event. So that was one of the ways that I wanted to make sure people weren't coming in with expectations of it being, that sit down, stare at the stage and feel like you can't talk to the people around you event. In fact, most of our event did not take place at the tables. Most of our event took place mingling outside. We had a pink carpet. So giving little teasers of all of those things, I think helped folks know what to expect a little bit more.
Yeah. For us, we're very fortunate that it doesn't have to be a fundraising event. We have to cover our costs. So as far as any concerns around securing funding, making sure that we had enough, we really felt like we were going to have the support from our community that we've had for years, and that paid off. For communications, we did the standard, email our mailing list and all of that. One thing that I've been noodling on that I'd really like to look at incorporating for the next year is that, as I mentioned, we had an ASL interpreter there on stage, but the majority of our student population is Latinx. And some portion of that is Spanish speaking first, and another portion is still in the EMLS community and doesn't really have the grasp on the English language yet. So what I'd love to do is offer all of our communications in both English and Spanish, and then offer real-time Spanish translation at the event, so that we're inviting in the whole community and that we're giving them a space to really hear the message in real time while they're there. So that's one thing that we'll be able to do to foster more of a sense of belonging. I don't know if I have anything else on that one.
No, I mean, we did try to front end, which is kind of a typical thing to do, and I'm questioning how community centric this is and how to look at this differently, because I know there's a question around sponsorships and having levels of sponsors and those kinds of things, which I might do differently next time, but it was kind of already too late in a sense. But in terms of just making sure the funding was covered, we definitely tried to make sure that it was sort of covered before that night. At least our cost. And we were really lucky to get some new sponsors and new support in the community that way, by just sharing who we are and, some folks who had never heard of us. And for example, I saw one winery who actually acknowledged their vineyard workers on their page and emailed her right away and was like, I love your website. You actually acknowledge your vineyard workers too. And they were a sponsor, like immediate. They were our first sponsor. It was really exciting. So just cultivating some of those relationships too. But I think, moving forward, I definitely want to look at what that means too, sponsorship and levels and those kinds of things for events.
Yeah, just look, I mean, to answer the first part of your question, one of the things Mary and I did is we sat down and we looked at the breakdown of the funds raised, and, looking at how much is actually raised before the night of the event. And I think for all of us who put on events, like a lot of that is raised before anybody shows up to that event. So just really asking the question of those donors, like, would you still give to this organization without this event occurring? And we felt very confident that yes, they would continue to give at those same levels, maybe more, without the event even happening. Like I said, a lot of our major donors do not attend the events. So for us, it was also just kind of doing that analysis of how much is raised prior to the event versus how much is raised during the event, and looking at other ways to make up that during without having to spend all of the expenses on the night. And, like you said, I would love one day to be so financially healthy that we can put on an event that is truly just celebratory and we can bring our community together, because that's what is so lovely about all of these events. But, until we're there, we're going to see how this works.
All right. For organizations that might have your typical gala, what would be your recommendation for a 1 to 2 first steps to having more community-centric event? Meaning, if we can't do it all at once, what would you / did you prioritize? Examples might be cost of ticket, hierarchy, paddle raise, admission, onward. For us, I think, we were looking at other organizations' ticket prices for events, and we were seeing, the 200s, 250s, and we brought it down as low as we could, doing the math on the back end, kind of answer your question also, Ellie, of like, we needed to set it at a certain place so that we could afford to give all of our volunteers free tickets, so that we could afford to do all of these things and still cover cost of venue and food. So that was like one of the first things. And I think that's one of the easiest things to do, because you can just create a spreadsheet and say, like, this is the bottom line of where I can go, and set your ticket price there. That's what we did. What did y'all incorporate as like a first step?
Yeah, I'm not sure who asked this question and if they had the opportunity to attend a community of practice session that we did 2 sessions ago now. It was at the Press Democrat. In that time, we did together an exercise called 15% Solutions. And it is part of the Liberating Structures, that Liberating Structures has a variety of different exercises that you can do with your team. And 15% Solutions is one of them, where you look at your issue together, and then you help each other figure out what can I do to get 15% closer? If I didn't have any more resources, time, money, people, anything, what can I do today to make this 15% change? And I think a lot of what you're able to come up with is going to come from that brainstorming session, right? Where you just combine all of your brains and say, okay, let's totally rethink this. I think if you go in with the assumptions of, okay, well, we have to have this is our sacred cow that we cannot get rid of, then you might not be doing it right. You have to like take everything off the table and build up and say, how can we do this? How can we envision this differently? Maybe some of those elements will come back and maybe you'll get rid of some of them forever, but that's where I would start.
That's one of the most challenging things about approaching event with CCF principals is just like the way that the donors are conditioned to know what a gala is.
Mm.
We are too, in a way that I kept having to tell myself, I was like, wait, hold on, that's not a required portion. We can make this however we want it to be. And having a team that I was bouncing ideas off of and a board that I was bouncing ideas off of that aren't really gala goers made that a lot easier for me. So I don't know how, but find somebody that doesn't like galas and maybe start with them.
Yeah, I would say like check your vibe, like check the vibe, because now that we are shifting in this way, like I went to an event recently and the theme of it and the vibe of it was just so far removed from the reality of the communities who are needing this support it just did not feel nice. And I walked in and the very first thing that someone greeted me with was, would you like to bid on this beautiful diamond necklace? And I said, where would I wear that? Like that, like, you know, it's just like so far removed from our realities that the vibe just felt ick. And so I would say that's like the number one, you know, just a first step is like, are you creating an environment that is just so dichotomous from the individuals that we're serving? So.
That's such a good point. I
Yeah.
think our real turning point in the planning was when we I just said, something wasn't feeling right. It wasn't resonating. And then when I just said, who are we? Like, who is our staff? Who is our
Yeah.
clients? Who's our community? And it just was so obvious after that what we needed to do and the elements we needed. And, you know, yeah, it just came together really beautifully. And a big thing for me was letting go of the auction. That was probably where I got the most pushback because people
Yeah.
are so used to that. And but really created so much space for connecting and for other things to happen that I don't think I would bring the auction back.
Yeah. I love that point about who is your community. We at the SRJC Foundation, we had the opportunity to go through a community mapping exercise with Michelle Shireen Muri, who's one of the co-founders of Community Centric Fundraising. And so within that, we outlined who is our community, who supports our community, who's missing from our community. And I think if you make that your North Star for who are you creating this event for, then that's what you can go back to when you get that pushback.
Yeah. We, in the same way that you got rid of your auction, well, in a different way, we kind of made our auction like a little community market of queer businesses, essentially. So every single one of our auction items was from a queer person or a parent of a queer person. So a lot of that too was like, I saw the silent auction as an opportunity to promote local queer businesses as well. And I've heard from a few of the folks that donated options to that auction that they now have recurring customers from the folks that had won that auction item. So kind of also rethinking like the purpose of each element felt really good too, of like, oh, I know I'm gonna have a room of X number of people looking at these things. So what can I put in front of their face that is gonna also work towards service of our mission, right? Of creating a more inclusive Sonoma County, promoting a local queer person's business. Felt like a cool opportunity to attack the auction issue from a different angle.
That wasn't a diamond necklace?
No, it was like a handbound journal and like that kind of stuff, right? So also most of the auction items were at a lower level and a lot more attainable for most of the folks in the room. Any other questions or?
Rachel?
Yeah.
So I do want to move towards this 15%.
Yeah.
So we have a very traditional event type gala that we're completely revamping, starting from scratch. So there's a lot to do and a lot of room for making changes. So I was wondering, what are your thoughts on, so let's say we have this auction component And, you know, depending on your event, because I've done lots of different auctions, sometimes they make a lot of money. Sometimes it's not that great, but it's still worthwhile. What if you took out the auction component from the in-person event and just moved it to an online auction? I always usually do an online component as well, because I feel like it's a lot easier, and then you get that whole group of people who just want to get prizes.
Yeah.
You know, 'cause there are those too. And they're still contributing in a different way, and they can still build your request list for future solicitations. So what are your thoughts on how that could align where? And again, I'm thinking, so our next event, we're gonna basically try and feature some of our clients, so that are in our dementia care programs. So in the dementia care programs, we have different sites throughout the county. And the clients have lots of activities that are set up for as part of the programming. So there's different, they'll bring in different artists to do different styles of artwork, like one group just did self painting. So what our plan was to bring the connection back was to basically bring in clients, and whether the clients want to come or their family caregivers or family wants to come to kind of speak for them or represent them, to have kind of more of an art show.
Yeah.
And so that, you know, we can add, my thought is we're not gonna make money on that. And maybe we'll just sell the art pieces or auction them, but keep it limited, like 10, maybe 10 total, and then no silent auction. Take it, you know, put that online if we still need to do that. So I'm wondering, is that the step in the right direction?
I think so. To me, that sounds like moving away from the paddle race, you know? To me, that sounds like making the display of wealth less visible. I do know that platforms like Givergy that have the online auction component will frequently still have like a landing page that's like so-and-so just pledged 15,000 for this trip to Italy. And I don't know if there's a way to turn that off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's a great, even if you can't turn it off, I do think that that's like a step in the right direction, right? Because people aren't going to be as engaged with those messages while they're just looking for auction items they want than if they were sitting in a room and like in a moment where they're supposed to be quiet and listening and turning their head and watching, you know? So that feels like a step in the right direction to me, but also I don't think that there's any like one right way to implement these changes.
There's not.
And I think there's going to be a huge component of trial and error. I know I experienced some error.
Yeah. And I love that what you're doing really is featuring your community, right? It's not the diamond necklaces, it's the art from your community. But
Yeah, that's the thing we're trying to integrate. I really like it.
yeah.
So I did have another question along the lines of the raise the paddle. Making it silent, like what were the logistics behind that in terms of making sure how people paid for that? Like, did they do it in the moment?
Yeah, that's another thing that we moved away from is the registering your credit card when you arrive. Because we all know how annoying that is.
Yeah.
Like, as somebody who goes to a million of these events, like, I don't want to stand in that line and register. And it's so presumptive to just assume that everybody's gonna bid or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
So we didn't do that, which really just helped welcome everybody. And we had QR codes. So, and Mary could probably speak more to the logistics of how it worked, but everyone had that silent moment where they could either fill out their card with their information or they could use the QR code with their phone. One thing we didn't do, which if I was to do a silent moment again, is we didn't let it be silent long enough.
Yeah.
And that was just, unfortunately, the person who facilitated that portion, we probably should have been clearer, like just let the silence be. Because she kind of wrapped it up before, I think, and I think people needed more time to think about what they wanted to give and have that awkward silence, you know? Which wasn't awkward, it was nice, I thought, but it ended too quickly, so. But,
So you have you have the QR code and then people just, and that link to your website?
it linked directly, you could speak, I don't know.
Yeah,
It linked
so we
directly.
had a designated form that night, to people that link directly to it. So we had a really high adoption rate on the QR code, but I think kind of following up on my earlier comment, the best thing about was, again, we made phone calls afterwards. So anybody who didn't use, well, you gotta say you called whether or not you used the QR code or not. But then we had to do follow-up because what we really instituted this year is we've been really moving toward letting people know that we accept donor advised funds.
Yeah.
And, and so that was one of the options on that card, was that they could pay through their donor advised fund. So that again gave us the opportunity to pick up the phone, thank them for their pledge, see how that was gonna be met, if they needed any information, So again, another excuse to pick up the phone. So we did, and we got full participation both through QR code as well as the pledge form, because that's always right. The fear is, are people gonna complete their pledge, right?
Right.
They're gonna make that
Yeah.
indication at that time. Is it gonna be completed? And
Okay.
we did do that.
Yeah. So it is 1:20 and we have this room until 1:30. So I wanted to offer up space for any final comments or concerns or questions.
I want to just have a closing thought on Rachel's question. It's a section that I took from, I was listening to one of Michelle Ramirez's podcast episodes this morning called Ethical Rainmaker, which is a really great one. It has tons of practical advice, tips on tactics that you can employ, and the hub on the website does as well. But the content of this conversation that she was having in this episode was really around this gray area that we all live in, and how it's so terrifying to fail in this space, especially when there are commitments to donors. And we have to get more comfortable with acknowledging that we don't really know all of the answers, and there is going to be some trial and potential failure along the way. And what they said in it was, what gets in our way is the focus on transactional relationships. It's part of an individualistic culture. Communal culture brings a more transformative and connective mindset around relationships. There are no clear answers. It is exploratory. Many of us have not been practicing what it means to live in the gray and ideate, explore, iterate, fail, and succeed. So I found that to be really helpful when you're thinking about, like, what if this doesn't work? This is really scary. This is different. I don't know anyone who's done this and succeeded before. That's an okay space to live in, and to set up to your board, this is what we're doing, and please be with me on this as we go through this kind of rocky, scary space.
I love that. One other thing I would say too is I try to go back as much as I can to the original CCF movement and the hub, and just remember and see what they're saying and the why, just to get back to the why, like, why are we doing away with the paddle raise? And when you read their essays on it, it's just like, oh, of course, it's just,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's very powerful just to kind of go back to the root of why we're making these changes and remember, because it can get really clouded by what we're so used to.
And there is an article on there specifically about paddle
Yes,
races.
yeah.
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 So that's another thing that I think is cool, is that we have this resource hub
Yeah.
of the CCF website that has a lot of information on the why that you can point to when folks are questioning. So I think that's like a blessing in disguise too, is like, it's not only guiding us, but it can also help guide our donors too.
Any other questions, final thoughts? Do you all have any ideas for how we can do better in the future?
Yeah, we want to continue to do these CCF in practice panels with members of the community of practice. So this one was just on events, and we happened to be design team members. Say me. But we'd love if there's any CCF in practice kinds of roundtable discussion panels. We'd love to hear that from y'all and invite you to be one of the speakers.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing.
One thing that was thrown in the chat that I do want to call out is that Madonna Feather invited everybody in this space and said, if any of you would like to tour Susquehanna Land Project this Sunday, I invite you. We are having a short board meeting at 10 to 11 a.m. and we'll be gathering and sharing food and space in St. Helena. And that information is in our chat. So if you're in the Zoom room, you can copy that. And if you are not, I will copy that information and can provide it to you afterwards. It looks as though 10 to 2 is the invitation for the tour. All right, well, thank you all so much for coming. And like I said, please let us know, the design team know what kind of roundtable you'd be interested in next time.
If you have it signed in, please make sure you mark your name over here so that we know. If you've never been here before, please give us your email address so we can invite you to the next one. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.